Welcome to our meditation time. Just allow yourself in whatever spot in your home that you have chosen, just allow yourself to settle. Just really ground through your seat, through your back if you're lying down. Close your eyes gently if that feels right. And just really allow yourself for these first few breaths to just be. Just really be in that space that you've chosen. Feel the air around you. Listen to the sounds. Notice the sensations moving through your body. And just realize the place that you've chosen is just right. It's just the right spot for you for this moment. And then as the new moment comes, it'll be just the right spot for that one as well. And what you start to notice over time, especially if you tend to show up in the same spot, or in familiar spots. As you sit for meditation, you start to notice this harmonizing of you with your environment. Things begin to feel a little more peaceful. You feel a little more grounded and secure and safe. And those sensations really do usher us into this practice and just hold us here. And so let's just pause together as we've each kind of harmonized, settled into our own space. Now let's bring a little unity within this community. Just taking a slow breath in. And as you relax your shoulders, just sigh it out. And a slow breath in. And again, relax the shoulders, sigh it out. One more breath in. And a breath out. And then settle a little more. Adjust as you need to adjust and continue to breathe with intention. Really noticing how you feel each moment along the way. And on this journey of looking at the Yoga Sutras as these guides or these guideposts to our everyday living, we've been sitting the last few times together with this idea of these fluctuations that come in our mind. That's why it's so important when we do come to meditation and we do pause, in whatever way that looks for us, that we feel safe in the spot where we are. Maybe it's the same spot for you every time, maybe it's not. But we need to feel grounded. We need to feel secured. We need to feel in harmony with that space that we've chosen, because the mind is busy enough. It tries to distract us enough. And so if we can really integrate into the environment where we've chosen to be, we won't feel the impact of the mind and the chatter as much. For most of us, it's still there. But over time, through this practice, its impact gets less and less and less. And the last time we were together, we talked about this idea, we sat with this idea of when these mental fluctuations, when these disturbances in our head, when we begin to let them calm and quiet, we see the true essence of who we are. And it's beautiful. And it's pure. And it's whole. But there's another Yoga Sutra that follows. It's actually the fourth one. And it basically says that if we're not careful, these mental fluctuations in our mind, which typically come because of a sensory stimulus or a disturbance, if we're not careful, instead of looking like the true version of us, we start to look like those. They start to create our reality for us. And I love that when Patanjali gave us these Yoga Sutras, he started off first with yoga, this practice, this breath, this being. It can calm these fluctuations in our head. And then he went on to say, and when they are calmed, not if, but when, you see the true, authentic you. So he told us that first, and then he went on to say, But be really careful. Because when you let these senses, these stimuli, these fluctuations and disturbances, when you let them just kind of run wild, if you're not careful, you begin to take on that as your identity. And so just think about it. When you've been in a crowd of people and there's this energy in the room, it's really hard. If your energy is different, it's really hard to stand apart. It takes a lot less effort to just kind of migrate toward that level of energy, whatever it is, good or bad. It's easier just to blend in. It takes less effort. And so that's what he's talking about, these identities that they begin to shift and we start to lose the true essence of who we are. And so I found this example that I thought might help us. So think about when you've been to the movies. Just see yourself sitting in the theater or maybe sitting at home watching a movie. And it's one of those movies that just touches your heart. It's got a storyline with all the right characters that you champion for. You like the people that they represent. And one of these characters is really going through something tough. And so you're watching the screen and you're hearing this dialogue and you don't know this person. They're most likely fictitious. But as you watch them struggle, you see their pain. You champion for them in your heart and they still struggle. Think about those times that you didn't even realize it was happening, but all of a sudden you feel tears running down your face. Or you feel this catch in your throat. Or this pit in your stomach. It's a beautiful thing that we have empathy and that we feel the way we feel. But what Patanjali was warning us against with this Yoga Sutra, this fourth one, is that if we're not careful, the same things that help us to feel, that help us to be empathetic and sympathetic, if we don't keep these things in our awareness, we start to become them. And just think about the movies. That doesn't mean we shouldn't cry, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't feel and champion for these characters. But think about how easy it is for us to feel what they feel when it has nothing to do with us. It's just a stimulus. It's something from our senses that causes a response, and then it causes an action. And what Patanjali is telling us with this sutra is that we need to be mindful, because the more that we repeat these actions, the more our identity starts to look like someone else. We become these mental disturbances in our head. If we surround ourselves with images and with people who are negative and speak violently or speak with harm or act unkind, if we're not careful, over time, those same ways of being come into our own spirit and our own life. It's subtle. But we look up one day and the same people whose negativity we didn't like, we realize we've become it. The same people's behaviors that used to bother us, when we hang out with it long enough, we start to take it on ourselves. If any of you have been parents, we've all had these conversations with our kids when they get to that really impressionable age about the friends that they keep and the friends that they're with, and the influence of peer pressure. So we know these things logically. We understand the impact of others' behaviors and others' energy. We know the impact of our senses, of our feelings. But y'all, I would like us to know just as much the impact of this practice, so that as we sit here and we cultivate this keen sense of awareness, when those other situations come up and those disturbances come in our head, we see it, we recognize it, and we let it go. We don't attach to it. Just like you would never leave that movie theater after you had cried about that person's plight or that person's dilemma, you would never spring into action and go do something on the behalf of that character. That just sounds silly. So you know how not to attach to what that person in the movie is experiencing. So what we need to do is we need to practice not attaching to all the things that are around us. People's behavior that's harmful or unkind. Behaviors that are impatient and intolerant. I get that we're surrounded by it. I get that we see it. It's on our social media feeds. It's in our news. It's in our offices. It's in our schools. But this practice helps us to be so keenly aware that we can see it, recognize what it is, and not attach to it. There'll be a reminder of it in our head that will spring up. We'll have this little agitation. We'll notice it. And we'll let it go. And we'll hold to this image right here, the true, authentic us. And it doesn't mean that we won't interact with the world and that we won't be around people who are challenging. It just means that we'll be very aware as we do. But then I will also tell you that over time, the more that this practice becomes part of your identity, this true, authentic way of being in this present moment, this state of peace and calm, when you cultivate this often enough, you realize that you don't want to be in those spaces anymore. And you start to make different choices. It's not about pushing people away. It's about choosing what you let in. And so as we pause here, I want us just to sit with that idea. The last time we paused together in our time, it was positive and it was affirming when we think about just seeing the true, beautiful us and letting that be our lens for the world. But we have to see the possibility of something else as well. And that possibility is our senses are going to show us things, make us feel things. Can we feel it and let it go without becoming attached to it? That really is what this practice is helping us to do. So let's just pause. Breathing slow, deep, nurturing breaths. Seeing the true us as your mind's eye looks into your heart. And let's cultivate that. And as we continue to breathe, I want to just say that we have to be courageous. We have to be courageous enough to see the true, authentic us and hang on to that image no matter what. It takes more effort to do that. It takes far less effort to just gravitate toward whatever's around us and become like that. It takes effort to do this. It takes effort to show up and to be still. It takes effort to cultivate peace and calm. And it takes courage to be so confident in who you are in a beautiful and humble and loving way that you're willing to be that person no matter what. I've shared before that a little over 2 years ago, I decided that I wasn't going to partake in alcohol anymore. It was a decision that it was time. And I remember just a few months after that, it wasn't a production and I didn't talk about it. But I share this with you because I want you to be courageous. And I had a dear friend who said, it's not as fun to hang out with friends who don't drink anymore. And I listened to it, and my heart for just a moment hurt. And then I took a deep breath in, and I held on to this image of me that I wanted to be. The true, authentic, whole me. And for months to follow, I kept trying to cultivate that relationship, that friendship that had been around for a long time. But eventually it just went away. It wasn't really anyone's fault, and there's nothing to blame. But I tell you that it took courage to be okay and not apologize that this is who I am. I'm working to cultivate her peace. I'm working to cultivate her wholeness. I'm working to know who she is. And I'm committed to that. But what often happens to us is whenever we do try to do things that are really healthy and mindful for our own lives, when someone doesn't agree with it or it makes them feel a certain way, we apologize for it. But I would encourage each of us, be courageous. Don't apologize for being the authentic, beautiful, whole version of you. You will have relationships that will shift and change and maybe even leave. And then you will have relationships that come because you've made space for people who align with you. And when you can cultivate that, confusion goes down in a way that you can't even imagine. And you really show up each day living the most authentic version of you that you can. So in the same way that you notice these disturbances, these stimuli, your responses to it, also notice your courage. Cultivate that. Trust in you. One breath, one moment at a time. Namaste.